one communist on the faculty of one university is one communist too many. One communist among the American advisors at Yalta was one communist too many. And even if there were only one communist in the State Department, even if there were only one communist in the State Department, that would still be one communist too many.
So we got even more updates to bring you today on the Democrat Party and what can only be described as their violent communism problem. Because thus far, we've given extensive coverage to Antifa and explained repeatedly how anti-fascist action, ever since its inception in Weimar Germany, is and always has been a violent, revolutionary, communist militant organization. It's not just an idea, as Democrats say, much less is it simply synonymous with anyone who opposes fascism. But of course, these are the dialectic games played by so-called liberals to constantly defend and ultimately make excuses for the communists that they always end up handing power over when they're elected in office, which is a really interesting phenomenon. What exactly should the conclusion be of the fact that Democrats constantly defend communism? Should we not sit here and conclude that it is fundamentally a communist party posing as some type of moderate neoliberal organization? Well, we'll talk about that later. Or the J. Jones scandal. We are, of course, talking about the Virginia Attorney General nominee for the Democrat Party, who we actually have updates to bring you today because last night he utterly imploded when he was finally confronted in the AG debate. But most importantly, today we have apparently a new challenger to the arena, a Democrat Senate candidate in the state of Maine, currently the frontrunner, by the way, from everything I can gather, named Graham Platner, who, we'll talk about it extensively, but to make a long story short, self-identified in Reddit posts just about 4 years ago as a communist who further labeled the police bastards and mocked rural white people as quote-unquote racist and stupid. So it's almost like when you keep producing rotten fruit as a political party, perhaps the tree itself is really having problems. And by the way, perhaps there is a reason why this week they've been so obsessed with this Young Republicans group chat that you might have seen. We're talking about people who don't actually have political power. Most of these guys are like 20-year-old something kids, but they want to look at this when obviously there's a gigantic fire over in the Democrat Party from your leading candidates, from your own politicians, deep within your ranks, and far from condemning it, they're openly promoting these people. So some of you wonder why I've been talking so much almost out of nowhere about communism ever since the Charlie Kirk assassination, and some people think I sound like Joseph McCarthy or I'm trying to like LARP as some type of 1950s Red Scare character or something like that. No, it is because this is clearly what is going on within this political party. So that said, guys, we'll tell you about all of this in today's video. First though, do us a favor. Unless you're a communist, make sure you hit that like button down below and subscribe to the channel if you are new. That is not only the best way to support our work, but that also ensures that you can stay up to date with all of the latest news and coverage. And that said, this week, as a matter of fact, CNN, ironically, was the outlet to break it. According to KFile, deleted posts now show a Maine Senate hopeful's raw views on politics, war, and the police. And this guy, by the way, just keep this in mind, has currently already raised $3.2 million for his Senate campaign. There's a reason why I say he does appear to be the front runner. For context there, the incumbent Republican Susan Collins, only $1.9 million. And keep in mind, right, this might actually be worse than the J. Jones situation, assuming, of course, that he does end up winning the nomination, because we're not even talking about a state-level position. This guy is running to be a senator, so let's learn all about him. Graham Platner, a Marine veteran turned oyster farmer who is now a rising Democrat Senate candidate, once called himself, quote-unquote, a communist and dismissed all, not some, all police as bastards, right? All cops are bad, and said rural Americans actually are racist and stupid, according to deleted social media posts revealed by CNN's KFile. By the way, he's running for Senate in the state of Maine. The entire state is basically rural white Americans, so I don't know exactly what he's talking about there. Is he not also a rural white American? I don't know. But anyways, Most of the posts were made 5 years ago. Under Platner's then Reddit handle, they were deleted ahead of his campaign launch in August. This guy really thought he was just going to hide all those tracks. Yeah, all the crazy things I said online. Ladies and gentlemen, digital footprint, it is indeed real. But the posts in some ways underscore Platner's reputation as an anti-establishment outsider with unapologetic left-wing views, but the labels and tone used in his writings could also prove costly in a state known for electing political moderates. And keep that in mind as well, right? You know, Susan Collins, Republican, senator of Maine, moderate Democrats, and here you have a self-avowed communist running. Is that going to sway votes? Well, we'll find out. But here's what's interesting, right? In an interview with CNN on Tuesday, Platner disavowed his posts, saying they came from a time when he felt disillusioned and angry and expressed those emotions online. He said his criticisms of rural white Americans and the police and his political comments do not reflect who he is and what he stands for today. Now, you read a comment like that, and you might think to yourself that, you know, this is some weird essay he wrote back in college, or this is decades old. But again, we repeat here, all of the stuff we're about to talk about today is from the year 2021. This is only 4 years ago. So 4 years ago, he was saying he was a communist, and then suddenly now he's like a super moderate, average, normal, old school, like your grandfather's Democrat. And are you noticing a pattern about this, ladies and gentlemen? Jay Jones, who we'll talk about later in the video, did the exact same thing. You know, he's like, oh, everyone makes mistakes, you know, stupid text messages. I didn't really mean it, as if that was not just 3 years ago, right? 2022 is when his tech scandal came out. And frankly, I will say this as well. I don't care how old the scandal is. The fact of the matter is that traditionally in this country, if you ever at any point in your life identified as a communist, not only would you likely be just disqualified from public office in the view of American voters, but it might straight up be illegal. Okay, we've talked time and time again about the Communist Control Act of 1954 and how a lot of this stuff used to be labeled, right? It was essentially illegal to be an organized communist for a lot of American history. But of course, here we are years later, absolutely not taking the advice of American people's own grandfathers on how to treat all of this stuff. But anyways, you know, you see that. You see the fact that, for instance, and by the way, I want to point out, this runs really deep in the Democrat Party. Karen Bass, as one example, current mayor of Los Angeles, when she was in college, was part of a Maoist revolutionary group, I believe took like several trips to Cuba and all this different stuff. And Mondani, as another example, you know, he just a couple years ago was talking about how he wants to abolish private property. Now he's running as some just left-wing populist who wants to address affordability. I mean, really? And here's the other thing about that, right? So I brought up, obviously, the past of what it would mean to be a communist in this country, but I'd also further like to point out, could you imagine a Republican candidate who, let's say, used to be in the KKK or used to be a neo-Nazi, and only 5 years later is running saying, I'm just a normal conservative now, right? That would never fly in the United States of America. Heck, he could be the Karen Bass thing. He could be a neo-Nazi back in college and he's running in his 50s and 60s. It still wouldn't matter. That'd be instantly disqualifying. And yet our country has an attitude towards communism, like largely because of the fact that communists have constructed and written a lot of our cultural norms, right? Remember cultural Marxism? That was a big conservative talking point back during the Biden administration. It is completely true. Have basically constructed the way we view these things, where it's like, okay, fascism is the only bad thing to ever exist in history. Don't look over here at what was happening on like the Eastern Front of the war you're taught about so much in school. You know, they're the only bad guys, and therefore it's perfectly okay to be a communist. As a matter of fact, as Democrats say nowadays, Antifa, the communists, are the good guys because they're against fascism, and Americans are just expected to sit there and take it. And you will see no condemnations of this, of course, from the National Democrat Party, because according to them, this is not even a big deal, right? Because they all feel the same way, frankly. We know the story, but anyways, here's his excuse. Saying that was very much me effing around on the internet, he told CNN. Oh, he was just joking. Okay. I don't want people to see me for who I was in my worst internet comment. Well, it's not your single worst. It's like many internet comments, or frankly, blah, blah, blah. I don't think it's indicative of who I am today. He said he deleted the posts because he only deleted them recently, keep in mind, because he no longer wanted to be associated with his online comments from a darker time in his life. Oh, you mean you were running for office and you thought, if I publicly say to people I'm a communist, maybe that might not fly well in the election. But just as one example, in a once now deleted Reddit comment from 2021, you can see here, Platner actually responds to this comment by saying, I got older and became a communist, right? There it is right there. I'm 37 years old. So keep in mind, again, he's not like 20. It's not like the high school kid who changes his political views every single year. 37 years old, I got older and became a communist, right? Further went on to talk about how he's a vegetable growing, psychedelic taking socialist. Definitely the person you want in Washington, D.C. But he, the violence part of this too, right? Still got the guns, though. I don't trust the fascists to act politely. And this is a trend you'll see a lot, right? The far left is actually pro-gun, at least for themselves. They don't want you to have guns, but they want to have guns because obviously they're revolutionaries. They want to commit a leftist insurrection against the United States of America. And here he is saying that himself, right? I'm a pro-gun communist because he doesn't trust the fascists to act politely. He is, taking psychedelics, all this stuff. Okay, but obviously prime Democrat candidate, right? This is what their party's all about. And by the way, this is just a dumb guy who got caught. Think about all the people who don't get caught because they're smarter but feel the same way. In another Reddit post that year, Platner reflected on his life after military service, as you can see, saying that about taking socialists and all that, psychedelic socialists, all that stuff. After the war, I pretty much stopped believing in any of the patriotic nonsense that got me there in the first place, and am a firm believer that the best thing a person can do is help their neighbors and live a loving life. So he's saying he's not even patriotic anymore. Okay, fine, fair enough. And what's to be expected there. But now in his interview with CNN, Platner wanted to assure voters, I'm not a communist, I'm not a socialist, I own a small business, I'm a Marine Corps veteran. Well, communists have infiltrated the US military in past parts of our history. I'm not sure if that's simply saying that because, I do other things outside of it. Yeah. It doesn't mean you can't be an undercover communist. Now, again, I want you to keep in mind, this is not some random fringe candidate. He has quickly emerged as a fundraising force in the Maine Senate race, bringing in more than $4 million in the weeks after announcing his candidacy, according to filings and campaign statements. His momentum has been fueled in part by a high-profile endorsement from guess who? Who else would it be? Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders, who appeared with Platner at a Labor Day rally in, wait a minute, Portland, Oregon. What is he doing over there, by the way? I thought this guy's running in Maine. Why is he speaking to the hub of Rose City Antifa alongside Bernie Sanders? Gee, it's almost like they're all in the same tent here. Almost like they're all collaborating together, right? Just saying. If Joseph McCarthy could see this, ladies and gentlemen, he's attracted national attention from progressive organizations, online left-wing influencers, and grassroots Democrats highly supportive of his outspoken economic populism. Well, as you see so often, you really break down these people's politics, the so-called progressive Democrats. I think you know the answer there. Now, some of his harshest rhetoric was directed at law enforcement, in threads about police shootings and the nationwide protests of George Floyd, saying things like the following, right? I was also a 19-year-old moron, F these cops. In another thread, he wrote, bastards, cops are bastards, all of them, in fact. So, he's obviously against all of the police, a very moderate, centrist, liberal view to have, right? Platner also frequently weighed in on police violence, arguing that misconduct was a, quote, problem that extends deep into the profession as a whole, and rejecting claims of accidental shootings. Apparently that can't even happen after incidents such as the killing of this guy, Dante Wright, writing F these cops, right? So you basically get the idea. Insane radical communist running for the Maine Senate seat. And actually, I'm told apparently Janet Mills, the current governor, just hopped in. So she's probably the front runner now. But up until this point, right, the Democrat front runner, and considering Janet Mills is like almost 80 years old, he could still win. He could still genuinely win the nomination. As you can see, he has a lot of momentum. You see a lot of these Democrat voters have completely taken off their mask. They're embracing the Mamdanis. They want radicalism. Trump has either broken their brains or kind of managed to like melt the outer layer of pretending to be moderate. So they're being honest about who they actually are. But last thing I want to read is what Platner actually thinks of his own voters, responding to a thread titled, "White people aren't as racist or stupid as Trump thinks." He said in response, quote, "Living in white rural America, I'm afraid to tell you they actually are." So yeah, you're talking about a guy here, and it goes on and on and on. A lot of other things we could read, but even hates his own voters, is racist against white people as a white person, and apparently despises them. And again, running for Senate in the state of Maine, ladies and gentlemen. So that's just another example of exactly everything we're talking about. I do want to shift here to discuss Jay Jones, who, of course, is currently under fire for his own violent text messages, where he was talking about how he wants to murder not just Republican politicians, but the children of those Republican politicians, saying that people will not change their minds and become leftists unless we personally make them feel pain. Totally deranged stuff, saying he was going to piss on the grave of Republican politicians and all this. And of course, when asked last night in his debate against the Republican incumbent, Jason Miyares, basically had the solution of, hey, let me deflect to Trump the entire time to make people ignore my obvious track record of being an insane, crazy person. Take a listen.
That's who his boss is. He'd rather be Donald Trump's pro bono attorney than do his job. And it's exactly why Donald Trump endorsed him, the only one running on the Republican ticket this year, for re-election. He said, "Jason will never let us down." And you all know that Donald Trump has spent the last 10 years telling us every day that he cares more about himself than anyone else.
Right, so that's apparently just the deflection to everything. You know, hey, Jay Jones, why are you a murderous, crazy, violent, insane person? Donald Trump. You know, the Democrats could literally resurrect Joseph Stalin or Vladimir Lenin, which they are, Maine Senate race. Okay, but no, in all seriousness, they could do that and then still justify voting for that person because Donald Trump, right? Donald Trump. Now, that said, as you could expect, the debate really just does not go all that well for Jay Jones because Miyares has way too much to work with. It's very easy to just end his campaign off of these comments alone. So take a listen to the response as Jay Jones desperately tries to make the race about Trump, when clearly you can see the distraction tactic. It's not even that hard to suss out. It's very obvious, right? Take a listen.
And the reality, Jay, is that your text messages that advocated for violence against innocent children, Jay, if you were to apply to be a line prosecutor in not just my office, any attorney general office in the country, you would not pass a background check. And right now, you may say that you are sorry, but look back at what happened. You had 3 years to say you're sorry, Jay, and you didn't. 3 years to actually recognize what you did was horrific. You chose to stay silent. Carrie Cornier called you out then. You doubled down. It was after she called you out for these text messages that is when you said you advocated for violence against children. And when this became public, we now know your first statement wasn't saying I'm sorry. The words I'm sorry wasn't even in your statement. It was to say we all send text messages we regret. You attacked the president and you attacked me. It wasn't until 12 hours after you were first notified that you then decided to say I'm sorry. Because at the end of the day, Jay, you're a politician, not a prosecutor, and you certainly can't be the top prosecutor in the state of Virginia. And I find it a little bit stunning that today you say one of the pillars of your public safety platform is protecting children. Were you protecting Jennifer's children when you said you wanted to see them die in their mother's arms? How can anybody who's ever worked in any of the crimes against children, all of the areas of federal and state local law department, how can they ever take you seriously, be the top prosecutor, knowing that you view that children should die to advance a political agenda? It's unconscionable, and if you were truly sorry, you would not be running for this office because you disqualified yourself.
I mean, yeah, it's just too easy, isn't it? But it doesn't actually stop there, guys, because he further goes on to blast Jay Jones about the special treatment he got for his reckless driving charge. I want everyone to remember, by the way, this is not the first scandal, the violent text messages around Jay Jones. This is a guy who got pulled over for going like 116 miles per hour or something like that from the Virginia police, which, by the way, in that state is like a felony, like it's a serious crime. And they made him do, I think it was 20,000 hours of community service or something like that. And 10,000 of those community service hours, he just worked for his own PAC. So in other words, he wasn't doing community service. He was doing the work he would have done anyway, which was ultimately self-serving to advance his political campaign. And nobody asked any questions or said anything or pointed out what a gigantic fraud that is. But take a listen when Miyares finally makes note of it.
Based on the incident involving Mr. Jones, how would you define the line between protected, albeit inappropriate, political speech and a communication that is legally prohibited? And you can address Mr. Jones's position as well. You have 90 seconds.
The reality is that Jay Jones was in court for going 116 miles an hour on Interstate 64. 4 people were in court that day who were going roughly the same speed. 3 of those 4 people got suspended or active jail sentence. But Jay Jones is a politician, and he asked the court not to give him any of that, to give him community service. And instead, we now know he misled the court. That community service, it wasn't done for a charity. It was done for his own political action committee that he controlled. And the reality, Jay, is that your text messages that advocated for violence against innocent children.
I gotta say, most of that was good from Miyares, but I would caution from framing Jay Jones as just another crooked establishment politician. No, it's not just that. Like, he's a violent, insane, crazy person. Don't even put him on the level. I mean, I guess that's a lot of politicians, but, of just being some type of like, do nothing politician. No, he does plenty. He does plenty in the direction of political extremism and violence. But all of that said, checking in now on some of the most recent polls conducted this week by Trafalgar, you can see that Miyares now, after trailing in the race before the scandal, enjoying these days a healthy 5-point lead. That's good news. Definitely happy to see, very likely. Don't get complacent, though. Go vote that the Jay Jones scandal is enough to make a Democrat lose election. At the same time, you have to point out he's still polling at 45%. So while I'm happy that, say, 5 to 10% of Democrat voters sincerely are turned off by some violent, crazy, insane candidate who wants to kill children, what does it say that about the 90% of the rest of the base are still perfectly fine in voting for this individual? Well, I think the conclusion of Jay Jones, of this guy in Maine, or many other situations, of course, many of the national politician rhetoric that you're hearing about Antifa, should lead you all to one central conclusion, which is, again, imagine if some of those people in the 50s could see this today. But the truth of the matter is, the Democrat Party, as well as many institutions in our culture, academia, it's not exactly a gigantic secret, all of these things have been infiltrated, sometimes publicly and sometimes privately, by self-avowed communists and Marxists. Okay? They say that's a conspiracy theory. Don't believe me? Look at a scandal like this right here. Or look at even Jay Jones. As I've been trying to tell people, the Democrat Party and Antifa are not that different or not that separate from each other, right? They can play this game of plausible deniability, where the Democrats claim they vaguely condemn violence, but they don't acknowledge that Antifa exists. They say it's just an idea, it's not real. They totally ignore the things that are happening. At the same time, Antifa always seems to do the same bidding of the Democrats because they want to stop Trump or they want to intimidate or agitate against conservatives, all those things. And so basically the relationship that you end up with is that Antifa is serving as a paramilitary arm of the Democrat Party. And the Democrats can sit there and stand like moderates, but in reality, as I so often say, they're working hand in hand with Antifa. Well, if you're going to understand there's a cross-pollination there of both sides, then inevitably what's going to happen to the Democrat Party? It's going to be overrun and in many cases infiltrated with a lot of the very Antifa types who just decide, oh, I'm going to put on a clean face and pretend to be like a normal Democrat, but in reality, no, I'm not. And then over time, they just become the normal Democrats, right? To the point where Mondani doesn't really have to be all that secretive. Bernie Sanders can endorse this lunatic and no one's really going to say anything. And that's what's going on. So just understand, right? I'm not some crazy person for suddenly talking a lot about communism in the last couple of weeks, right? And it's not because I've been watching too many documentaries about the Cold War or something like that. No, it's because it's happening right now in America. And, if you want to talk about American history, if the left wing wants to constantly say that, oh, the World War II soldiers were Antifa because they fought against fascists, which is not true, then I would say let's properly, first of all, understand the history of Antifa, again, communism, and then tie that back to, you want to constantly, guys, liberals, left-wingers want to invoke the greatest generation, invoke the World War II veterans? Then let's ask the question, What did those World War II veterans do culturally and politically the moment that they got home? Basically, they purged all the communists from society. That's the very shorthand of it, right? There were not any of these debates, actually, about, oh, if you bring RICO against the organized left, is that authoritarian? If you label Antifa domestic terror group, is that anti-free speech? No, they just did those things, okay? They just passed those laws. They just set up the Senate Committee on Anti-American Activity and was extremely popular in the United States at the time, okay? So just understand that, right? The worst thing that liberals in this country and ultimately the communists that they serve could face is if the right wing right now in this country actually acted like the World War II veterans, because the World War II veterans didn't just fight a war. They had a legacy when they came home. And frankly, if they were still around today, there would be no tolerance for this type of garbage. But yet, here we are, of course, and, well, we can only hope that this type of stuff is, in some way or another, brought out of the Democrat Party and just not really seen as acceptable in society again, as America should be. But, there we are, right? Who really won the Cold War? Can't answer it, because it would seem to me, But, okay. That said, guys, do us a favor. If you enjoy our content, make sure you hit that like button down below. Subscribe to the channel if you are new. And until next time, God bless and peace.